Today I'm going to show you how to install a Banks monster ramp on a 2019 to 2024 6.7 Cummins. Now this procedure will be almost identical for an earlier model 6.7 Cummins, but in the future I'll try to make one specific for those trucks as well. Now the main reason that we install a Banks monster ramp is to get rid of the factory grid heater, and I'll show you why. This is the factory grid heater I took out of a 6.7 Cummins a little while ago, and as you can see, this nut right here is completely melted. Now this guy got super lucky and this nut actually didn't break off and fall into his engine, but he was dang close. So when this nut does fall off, it goes into your intake manifold and it rolls down into number 6 cylinder and completely destroys your engine. So as you'll see, the Banks kit completely eliminates that issue, along with some other added benefits like better throttle response, improved fuel mileage, and they're easier on your turbo. And if you want one of these for your trucks or anything from Banks, I do have a discount code I will link in the description. But anyways, let's get right into the job. Now I am a journeyman mechanic, but I more so identify as just a garage mechanic like most of you guys watching. I do cut corners from time to time and I don't follow instructions. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. And if you are unsure about something, Banks has really good instructions on all their products. So the first thing we want to do is disconnect the negatives on both batteries. You can undo this one right here. And on the passenger side, I find it's easier to just undo this nut and take that off. Now I find it's a good idea to stick a rag or a glove in there just to make sure that these aren't making any contact. Now if your truck is still emission compliant, you're going to have a pipe that comes from here to your EGR cooler with 2 V-band clamps on each side. You're going to undo the V-band clamps and you might have to pry them off with a screwdriver. Once you get this pipe out, we can take off the EGR valve. Now there's 4 10mm bolts for that. Unplug it and pop it off. And just a side note, this kit works with or without a delete kit. So if you're emission compliant, that's fine. And if you're deleted, it will work as well. And if you are looking for a delete kit, I will have those linked in the description as well. So we can get this guy off of here. Now we're going to remove this bolt for the oil dipstick and kind of unclip this electrical and just try to get it out of the way. Now there's still a bracket back there that kind of holds this thing firm. We'll get to that later. But now we're going to want to pop this electrical off, pop this connector out of there, and these 2 bolts. We want to take this little metal bracket that the dipstick mounts to right out of the truck. And here it is. Now this is your factory grid heater power wire. There's a 10mm nut down there. We want to undo that nut and just take this cable out and fold it over to the passenger side. Here's the cable, and on this particular model, this nut is actually fixed to this part. We're just going to tuck it over to the side for now. Now we're going to actually remove the factory intake horn. So there's 5 bolts remaining down here. We have to unplug a map sensor, and then the throttle valve is down underneath there. You can kind of unplug the throttle valve once you have this moving freely. It makes it a little easier to access. And there's a clamp here where it connects to the boost pipe, and then we're just going to remove it from the truck. Now you'll likely be stuck to this rubber boot, so you can use a hose pick like this, or what I do is just kind of twist it like I did until it becomes free. Then I can kind of pop it out. You can flip it upside down, and then you can see your throttle valve plug. All these modern connectors have these stupid safety locks. This one you just kind of got to pull it over and then pop it forward like that, and then you can pinch it here and wiggle it off. I just probably need 2 hands for it. Oh, there we go. And then you can pull this out of the truck. Now can we just take a moment to look at how freaking disgusting that is? And look at the factory grid heater. Look at all that gunk on there. That's all coming from your EGR, and it goes right into your engine. That is why you delete your truck, to save your engine from dying from the EGR suffocating it. And again, delete kits are linked in the description. All right, moving on. We need to get access to all these fuel injector lines. So we want to take this injector harness off first. I like to use a pick down here to kind of twist to push the tab in and then pop it out. This is the tab I'm talking about right there. You can fold this out of the way. Now there's this hose and that hose, and they just slide off. Sometimes I like to use a upholstery tool here and kind of get them moving, as you can see, like that. Then you just kind of wiggle and pop them off like that. And again, there's another one back there, and just fold it all out of the way. I'm also going to undo this connector. You press the tab here, fold this lever back, and pull it apart, and it'll just give us some more room back there. Now there's another connector back there, the white one. There's another injector harness connector back there, similar to this one, and a sensor that goes right down there. And you can also pop it off here, but we want to unplug that and just give us more room, because after that we have to take this foam out. This sensor right here that plugs straight down has this stupid black cover on it. You kind of use a pick and pry it out of the top. Then you can pop this yellow tab up and then open it up and pull it off. You don't have to put that black cover back on. Now there's also a 10mm bolt right there where my finger's touching that connects to your oil dipstick. Take that bolt out, and then that bracket will kind of slide over and we can get this out. Other than that, we have all our electrical loose. It's all off. Then we're going to pull out this foam. Okay, this is a little bit more loose now. So now we're going to wrestle this foam out, and you can flex it. Again, it's just foam, and I never reuse it, so don't worry about wrecking it. There it is. All that foam does is apparently dampen the sound from your engine. So if you don't mind your engine being slightly louder, then just don't use it again. So I've got the wires kind of out of there. It's as open as I can get it. Now we're just going to start removing the fuel injector lines. So start with the first one and just work your way back. The first 5 aren't bad, but number 6 can be a pain in the ass, but I'll kind of show you what I do when we get there. Keep them all in order. Like I have front to back here, just so it's easier to reinstall. So the first 5 aren't horrible, but number 6, see, I have number 6 loose on the fuel rail. but that's it back there at the back of the cylinder head. That one's kind of a pain in the ass. So to get the back one, I usually use a 19mm crowfoot, and I kind of put this on the fuel line, and then I put it on this ratchet and I break it free with that. I also have a special wrench, like as you can see, I have a wrench on it right now. I've kind of ground it down so it fits back there. And there we go. This one actually wasn't as bad as they can usually be. Put it here with the others. And here's my special wrench. As you can see, I've ground it so it's skinnier. And I also took off some material up here so that it fits kind of on the fuel line with that bracket there. Now what's left on this fuel rail is there's a fuel line right there. You can undo that. There's another one there on the top. And then at the very back of the fuel rail facing down, there's an electrical connector. But usually I'll unbolt the fuel rail and then twist it upside down kind of, or twist it to the side to get that electrical connector. And there's just 1, 2, and 3 bolts. I already took that one out because that's on this oil dipstick. And we're gonna pull that fuel rail out of the truck. Sometimes to get this fuel line disconnected, you may need to loosen it down here on the CP3. This one also has a bracket right there that holds the fuel line on. But this one I can actually just kind of pop out like that, and then the fuel rail will come out. Now for that fuel line back there, make sure you save both washers when you pull this banjo bolt out. You kind of have to push that fuel line out of the way a bit, and then you can wiggle this fuel rail out. One of the nice things is that the connector on the back, there's no stupid safety lock for it or anything. So you can reach your arm down back there and actually just pinch it and pull it off. Now we're actually gonna take this whole grid heater and intake plate out. There's just a bunch of 10mm bolts like this. For this connector, you gotta pop this stupid black tab off, and then you can access the locking tab like that and unplug it. Yeah, pull that whole grid heater and intake plate out. All right guys, moment of truth. Let's go see how this grid heater nut is. It's always totally random. This one looks not bad so far. These are little Katz ass brake clean. Use code DARKIRON, save 10%. It looks like this one is all right. This is the problem nut. Again, it's totally random when it fails. For example, this is one where the nut did fail, but luckily we changed it just before this broke off and fell into the engine. Even on my 2022 6.7 Cummins, when I took my grid heater out, my nut was melted, similar to that one I just showed you. Not quite as bad, but it was getting there. Again, it's just totally random when they fail, but if they do fail, you're rebuilding your engine, which is extremely expensive. So now what I like to do is just kind of scrape all this shit off the side, then grab a shop vac and just suck all of the debris out, all the little bits of dirt and rocks and whatever, and just clean this out really nice. I also like to kind of scrape this out a little bit, get all the carbon buildup off. And again, it's just gonna get sucked up through this vac. And make sure you remove this old gasket because we're gonna be replacing it with a new one. But it should look something like that when it's all done. And make sure you give this gasket surface a nice clean too. Now we need to reassemble with the new Banks Monster Ram. So first we're gonna start with installing this new intake plate, but we need to take this sensor out of the factory one, and then we're gonna thread it into there. Definitely wanna clean this sensor before we put it in the new intake plate. And this already has this sealing washer, so you should just be able to drop it right in and give it a good snug. And you want to get this gasket, and we're going to go put it in the truck. I don't know if it matters, but I put the banks facing up towards the back just like that. Now carefully set this new intake plate in. Now I like to put a couple bolts from the old intake horn here just to hold it in place. But then the last bolts we took out to remove the plate, we're going to put those back in. Then you can put that bolt, that one, and the one in the back. Tighten them down, give them a good snug. I don't know the actual torque spec off the top of my head. If you want to look it up, you can. But just make sure you give it a nice firm snug, but don't over tighten it. Now before we put the fuel rail back in, I like to kind of just give these injector lines a little spray of brake clean. Just want to keep everything nice and clean. I do the same thing with the fuel rail, just get it nice and clean. And I use Katz ass, there's a link in the description, and code DARKIRON saves you 10%. In Canada, they banned certain formulas of brake clean, so the brake clean just went to shit, but this Katz ass stuff, like it actually works like the old stuff. Then you can put this fuel rail back in, also put this bolt in. I'm leaving this one out for now just so I can still move this dipstick. Tighten this fuel line here and tighten it down on the CP3 if you loosen it there. And make sure you get that banjo bolt on. And don't forget to plug it in at the back. Again, I just reached around and I was able to plug in the electrical connector onto the fuel rail. Now for this sensor that we relocated right there, I actually unclipped this electrical and I tucked it behind the dipstick, and it's going to plug in there. It's going to reach, but I'm going to leave it unplugged for right now just till we get those fuel lines on. Now we can reinstall the fuel injector lines, except for don't put number 1 cylinder on. Number 6 is the gayest, but if you have some patience and the right tools, you can get it on. And I always just put this against the brake clean and spray out the lines and just make sure they're nice and clean before you install them. All right, I got number 6 fuel injector line on, and again, I was able to do it with this goofy ass wrench I kind of custom ground down. So now I'll put cylinders 5, 4, 3, and 2 on. but leave cylinder number 1. We'll put that one on later. So now we're done messing back here. We can kind of get this electrical back in there, plug in this sensor. We have this rear fuel injector harness. Plug in the white sensor we relocated. We can even get this connector back done up right around here. Don't forget to put this vent back on. I think I got all my electrical back done up there. Currently, I still have this dipstick bracket loose. I think I'm gonna leave it loose for right now. It shouldn't be hard to get that bolt back in at a later time. I did leave this one undone and that guy undone just for right now, because it might make it a little bit easier getting this intake horn in. I'm just gonna take out these pilot bolts I put in there because we're not using them again. And then we can get the new monster ram in. So first, transfer this map sensor over to the Banks monster ram. Probably wanna give this a little bit of a clean too. Now that that's in, we have to plug this, and that hole. Should have 4 of them right here, and they should already have some thread sealant on them. Now don't over tighten these, but make sure they're nice and snug or you will lose boost pressure. Now this black one goes right here. It doesn't come with thread tape, so I'm gonna put some on. There, we got that one plugged off as well. Now we're almost ready to put this in, but I just wanna do a breakdown of the bolts. So these 4 washers will go on these long Allen key bolts and these shorter Allen key bolts. The long ones go right here and here. The shorter ones go right here and here. And then these 2 right here, they don't get washers. One of them goes right here, and then the other one we're actually gonna end up feeding through with a magnet. And if you can see down there, there's the bolt hole. Here's another angle of it right here. The last thing we need to do is take this throttle valve and transfer it from our factory intake horn to the Banks intake horn. There should just be 4 8mm bolts, and don't worry about taking this heat shield off. You don't have to. Make sure you get this old gasket off. You're gonna use a new gasket. You're gonna put it right here and then use the factory bolts to tighten it up to the monster ram. And if you wanna transfer this heat shield off, you can unbolt it and move that over here, but I just think it takes away from the look of the monster ram. And I honestly don't know what it does. This truck's deleted, so this throttle valve is no longer used, so I really don't care. If you're running a stock emissions intact truck, then maybe transfer it over, but I really don't think it's a big deal. Make sure you grab this gasket. And this gasket actually says front right there. So we're just going to set it in place just like that. Now actually, just before we install this Banks monster ram, I did put this bolt in back here for this dipstick, because we're gonna have to kind of bend this dipstick up a little bit like what I just did. Okay, now just before we put the monster ram in, we're actually going to install the new fuel line that comes with the kit. So install the injector line for cylinder 1, and then the Banks goes in. Now with that fuel line in place, we're gonna install the Banks monster ram. And again, like I said, I like to put it in this boost pipe first, and then I kind of twist it into place and make sure this gasket is in there. So I'm just getting all the bolts started. Now that back one back there, you can't really get anything on it, but Banks does give you this long Allen key extension. So basically you just put it back there. Then you grab a ratchet with a 6mm socket, and then you can kind of tighten it down that way. I'm getting all of them started before I actually tighten any of them down. And then the one in the middle, I use a magnet and I just feed it down in there, and then I start it like that. Once you have them all started, you can tighten them all down, and this is what I use to tighten them, except for that back one. I use this piece that Banks gives you. Then you can tighten your boost tube clamp. Now you can plug in this injector plug. Then underneath it right there, there's that hose. You can slide that on. Grab this little bracket and the bolt that comes with it. And the bracket goes right there, and you can attach the dipstick to the other end of the bracket with the factory bolt. Now it's time for the heater coils, and this truck is actually getting 2. I know these look different color, but they're the same thing, trust me. So if you're doing 1 heater coil, you're gonna put it in the middle, and you're gonna plug off these 2. If you're doing 2 like me, you're gonna put 1 here, 1 here, and then you're gonna plug off the middle hole. Make sure you're installing every heater coil with one of these copper washers. So my heater coils are installed. I'm gonna grab one of these plugs with this O-ring built into it, and I'm gonna tighten that down in the middle. Now we're gonna grab this from the kit. Use the bolt to tighten this new bracket onto the existing grid heater cable. And we're gonna take this nut off the first coil, just like that, and that is going to go on like that. Now, if you only have 1 heater coil, you're just gonna put the nut on and you'll be in the middle. But this one actually has 2. So we're gonna connect them with this little wire. And that's kind of what it looks like if you're running the dual heat. When you tighten these, be very careful. Use an 8mm wrench on the bottom to hold that nut, and don't over tighten them. They're very fragile. Now, normally you would put the EGR valve back on, but since this truck is deleted, we're getting a nice shiny blocker plate. Now, I actually just took this off. Oof. Oh, we got it. Lucky. As I was saying, I just took this off because I think there's some heat shrink I forgot to put on. If you grab this from the kit and you use a little heat gun or a torch or something, it should shrink around the cable. There, that's better. It's gonna hook this back up quick. There, that looks a little bit cleaner. Now when you're putting this blocker plate on or the EGR valve, make sure you use the new gaskets that come in the kit. This particular blocker plate has O-rings in it, so I didn't need the gaskets, but just make sure you have something in there. But if you did have the EGR installed, this is when you would put that crossover tube back on with the V-band clamps. And you'd also probably want to put this heat shield on. I believe it just goes under those bolts right there. But that's only if you're running the EGR valve. Right here we have some extension harnesses that came with the kit. I'm assuming this would be to extend your throttle valve maybe, and this is probably for your EGR valve. Now again, on this truck, we're not using those. There's also caps for the fuel line. We never use those. There's this little guy and this bolt. I'm not 100% sure what those are for, but we didn't use them. And this is the other plug if we're just running a single heater coil. Make sure you plug in this map sensor back there. And if you're still running your emissions, make sure you plug in your EGR valve, your throttle valve, and then there's this guy too on that crossover tube. Then you can hook up your 2 negative battery cables, and that should be it. Go drive, listen for boost leaks. As long as you did the job properly, you shouldn't have any. But if you forget a bolt or you didn't tighten something down, you might hear a boost leak and it could throw a code. Again, for any Banks product, I'll have a discount code in the description. And I also have links to delete kits if that's something you want to do to your truck. But anyways, guys, that's it for the video. I hope that helped you if this is something you're looking to do to your truck. If you want to support the channel, go to darkirondiesel.com and get yourself some merch. Follow me on Instagram, and thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road.